Mihawk says you're holding your sword wrong.
This is the Kitsune clan, a group of sword enthusiasts who like cosplay, reenactment, and historical martial arts. If you have similar interests, feel welcomed.
We've talked a bit about this already in several videos. However, I feel the need to make that point again and with another example. You are likely holding your sword wrong. What most people consider the normal hold for a sword is probably not what most people used in the past. Most people that do HEMA are fully aware that there is the so-called thumb grip or thumb hold, where I hold the sword with the sharp edge facing sideways and not forward. And through historical comparisons and biomechanical considerations, I argue this is in fact the normal hold for all, at least for most swords in this world. And it's easy to show that with some simple examples, and I've done so for some cases already, including, for example, Indo-Persian swords. Today I want to look at Mihawk's giant sword, and it's only usable in thumb hold. You can easily recognize this. If you take the sword in what most people consider the normal hold and you try to swing it, always the crossguard will press against your arm and even leave marks there. You could now argue this is a stupid sword, but we know that there are giant swords like the Great Sword, the Montante, the Zweihänder, whatever you want to call it, that basically had an arrangement with a large crossguard. And there's only one way to hold this properly, and that's the thumb hold. I demonstrate this here with Mihawk's sword. If you're using thumb hold, you can make 6 very decent cuts, 3 of them with the long edge and 3 of them with the backside. If you consider the hits with the backside a cut or not, depends a bit on your taste. What you have, of course, with a curved blade like Mihawk's sword, you have an attack that comes onto the point, especially interesting against armored opponents. And yes, I'm fully aware this sword is still not the correct size, but it is the largest one I could get. And also you see the same joke you can see with other sword tubers. The pommel is missing. That's a common theme in some of these fantasy swords. They tend to lose their pommels. Anyway, what do we get? If we do forehand cuts, we get 2 attacks with the backside, namely a strike where my left foot is in front and I can strike with the backside. When I make a foot step forward, I can have my normal cuts and I can make them high, low, horizontal or diagonal, no problems. And then there's another cut with the uncrossed arms, where I simply do a Zwerchhau for Filipino martial arts and Abanico with the backside. I can combine these 3 strikes to strike from one side 3 times or only 2 times. Why is this good? So I can displace, for example, an incoming sword with one of these attacks, especially the one where I strike with the backside with the left foot in front is often used as a defensive action, and then I can let follow very fast one of the other 2 attacks. From the backhand side, we have 2 cuts with the long side and 1 with the backside. So we have a very strange at first cut that is very short. Right foot is in front, where we actively cut with the long side in a very close distance to us. Then we have a long range attack while we make a step with the left foot forward, striking with the backside. And then there's the cut with the crossed arms, a horizontal cut. In most cases, that is again a type of Zwerchhau or an Abanico, and then I can change back and forth. We have looked at this sequence of strike already with the long sword and also with the super heavy sword of guts. And recognize that especially with gut sword, this is useful because we come from each cut into a smooth transition where we can then rest the sword either on our hip or on our shoulder, and the same is true here for Mihawk's sword. It's easier to recognize these mechanics with the very, very heavy swords. When I started out to do sword fighting decades ago, I was also considering the thumb hold to be the exotic version and the so-called normal hold to be the normality. The more I train with heavy swords, long swords, special swords, whatever, the more I recognize that the thumb hold is the one that comes much more natural and leads especially to much more fluent types of cuts. And I don't get really why everybody is still so fond on the so-called normal hold. I know it, in fact. It's related to the cutting tests because for most people it's more natural to cut with these normal holds, but that's a matter of training as well. If you do the cuts in thumb hold, they are very, very effective, and if you think about fast cuts, you can much faster change from one cut into the next one in the thumb hold because that's what this thing is designed for, and that's why the hilts of many swords look like they look like, and also why the blades of many swords are designed how they are. The point is simply you need to somehow use both sides of the sword. With a straight sword, that's very simple. You usually have two edges, but also especially with the curved swords. The backward curved tip of a saber, of a katana, of a talwar, or whatever is a formidable special weapon. And just ascribing the curvature to a nice cutting geometry is heavily underestimating what you can do with such a backward curved edge. It's a very, very dangerous weapon. It brings a lot of force onto a single point. We have demonstrated that in other videos. I'll link them in the description box. And this high-end design is much more than a simple coincidence. It's a clear indication how you should hold your sword in a way that you can also make use of this. But, yes, you can complain as much as you want. If you look at a lot of swords, at their handle construction, at the way we get them out of the sheath of the Zaya or whatever, all of that works much better in thumb hold. And even I've pointed that out in other cases as well. Even, for example, the rapier, where everybody is so keen on placing the index finger in a very vulnerable position and painful one above these finger rings. Try once fencing rapier with a thumb hold and you will recognize this is the much better way of holding your weapon. I know I can preach as much as I want. People will not get on my side just by preaching. Therefore, my advice here, and that's what this video is about, get one of these Mihawk swords and try to use them in normal hold, and then try to use them in thumb hold. And you will recognize why the thumb hold is the superior way of holding this weapon. And after you've done so, go back to your other swords and hold them again in the thumb hold, and you will recognize what you gain from that. So, not too much complaining, more of a suggestion here. I hope we could inspire you. See you around next time.